Bienvenidos todas y todos. Welcome to this new episode of KRIS'S Court, the podcast where I, the host, Chris Torres, talk about legal terms, law in Puerto Rico, and what I think about it all. And today, wow, do I have a special episode for you. Who's ready? Court's officially in session. All right. So, what am I talking about? What's this special episode about? Well, I, as a law student in la Universidad de Puerto Rico, la Escuela de Derecho, I had the opportunity to be a part of a talk, un conversatorio, with the Associate Justice, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor. And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, I would say. Now, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor, she is special to Puerto Ricans. Why? Well, she is the first Puerto Rican and the first Latina to be a member, right, on the bench, one of 9 members of the bench of the Supreme Court of the United States. Let's hear a little bit about her so we can get an idea of just what she went through and why all of this matters. She grew up in the Bronx, New York, to Puerto Rican parents. Now, her father apparently died when she was 9 years old, and she was raised by her mother for a time, then by her grandmother, and she also had diabetes, type 1 diabetes, at an early age. But despite all of those things, she was able to attend Princeton University, and she graduated summa cum laude. Then she went on to continue her academic career in the Yale Law School, obtaining a Juris Doctorate in 1979, and she was also part of the Yale Law Journal. She later rose to the ranks slowly and steadily from an assistant to a district attorney in New York to being nominated for the U.S. District Court, then as a judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and all the way up to being nominated in 2009 by Barack Obama to the Supreme Court. Now, she has a lot of experience. She's written about and worked with a lot of cases and wrote through several opinions in her throughout her career. And well, she came to Puerto Rico and spoke to all of the law students in the Escuela de Derecho, right, the law school of UPR, the University of Puerto Rico. And of course, she talked to us personally. It was just, a wonderful opportunity to hear from one of the justices of the Supreme Court. Now, granted, the things that she said are not ex cathedra. That is, she's not saying it from a point, as a judge, but just talking in a sense as a person based on her experience as a professional. She shares some insights, some thoughts about the world of law, about the world of being a justice, the judicial system, the legal system. And well, I want to share some of the things that were discussed. So the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor gave us the opportunity, us students, to ask questions directly to her that were pressing on us. Las cosas que nosotros pensamos que realmente son de mayor importancia para nosotros como estudiantes de derecho, right? So for us as law students, what were some of these really pressing matters that we wanted, to talk about, to think about? And so some of those things that she discussed range from whether or not there should be an ethical code for judges, how long should judicial terms be for the United States justices. In the case of the Supreme Court, the justices have a term for life, right, as said in the U.S. Constitution, pero en Puerto Rico, basado en la Constitución ¿verdad? Nuestra, del Estado Libre Asociado, right? So our Constitution as a Commonwealth of Puerto Rico under the United States states that Supreme Court justices, right, of our court, nuestro tribunal, can only serve until they're 70. Then they have an obligatory retirement, right? And as a result, that was one of the questions that she asked. So there's a difference between the two systems in our case, between the one in the Puerto Rico and the United States, right, based on the constitutions that we have. And then she also talked about emergency rulings, and also talking about her perspective related to methodology as she looks at cases, as she writes opinions. So she really discussed a wide range of material. Okay. Now, I wanted the opportunity. I wish I was able to talk to her and interview her for this podcast, but unfortunately, that wasn't possible. There was security around, and even a lot of things you couldn't, take photos and so on. So there were certain things that limited the ability. But thankfully, I was able to think through and recall some of the things that she discussed, and I want to present them to you. Now, when she, uh, came on the stage, she showed herself. Well, the way that she looked was very delicate, muy delicada, pero al mismo tiempo tenía esa pasión por el derecho. She was passionate. You can tell, though, even though she seemed delicate. I mean, she'd been serving for a long time, and it's a lot of work, I can imagine. And she still had some fire. She still had that. She was very relational, walking around, talking to us, taking pictures with us, and really showed the person, right? Her personability, despite being a judge of this caliber. So that was something that I really noticed, and I really appreciated that. Though she seemed delicate in some way, she showed. I mean, and even through the opinions, whether you're for them or against them, she showed that she was very. She was a force with great power and great analytical skill, and she has been able to interpret the laws accordingly, right? Now, she talked to us as students about the importance of having a moral compass. She said that we needed to find this moral compass, to be guided by it. And she said that this moral compass really helps us in our decisions, in our ethics, in our character. And I 100% agree that that is super important for us to think through. I think that I've already found my compass. I think you develop it through different, areas, spheres, right? But one for me has definitely been my background, my religious background, my background as a Christian, and that moral compass is super strong. Do I fall short of it? Of course, but at the same time, it is there and it guides us, and I think that that is super important. And she reminded us that it's really not just about power for itself, for its own sake, or money, but what we're doing as law students, we're taking, we're learning skills. We are gathering tools and resources to be able to defend, to be able to guide, to be able to represent people, and we really need to take that seriously and not just take it as a joke. And it's not just a profession per se. She didn't say that, but I definitely gathered that, and that it's really a calling, as many things are. But you really have to remind yourself of that, and that moral compass helps with that area. Now, when she talked to, when a student actually asked her about her perspective of, well, she is, Latina, she is a woman, she is of Latin descent, and being of that, having that identity, that background, how has that influenced her analysis, her decisions in determining cases, or the constitutionality of things? And she really said, and it was really surprising. She said, "Soy Sonia Sotomayor. I am Sonia Sotomayor," right? And she said, "I'm not just Latina. I'm not just a woman. I don't just think about those things individually, right? I am a collective of experiences. I'm not just isolated moments, right?" And it really resonates with what she says later on, and what she had said later on, and related to context, right? You don't just take a person and take them out of their world. They are a part of a world, and they have a certain perspective. And she said it's a collective, right? So all of my experiences have brought me to this place, and she really expressed it well, that the differences that she's had, it seems like, or the differences that people can have as lawyers, as judges, is related to their experience, and we need to be able to have a conversation, right? Now, her role as a judge, she says, well, based on my role, what I really focus on is not just my identity. I try to distance myself from the law, and I try to apply it as it is, how it's set, right? How it's expressed, and based on its context. Yo soy abogada primero, right? I'm first a lawyer, then luego un juez, then I'm a judge, right? And I review the laws that they're expressed. And but even related to all of those things, she says, when I think of my experiences, I let that, obviously that has an influence, but I try to, in some ways, detach myself as best I can. But when I think about my identity, or when I think about my experiences and other people's experience, it's good to understand that we had these differences, these experiences, because they allow us to have a conversation. And I think that was super, super important. She mentioned that. Another thing that she was asked was related to, well, can UPR students, estudiantes de la UPR, estudiantes de la Escuela de Derecho en Puerto Rico, ellos pueden lograr tener puestos en el sistema judicial federal de los Estados Unidos, right? So can students from UPR aspire to the highest positions of the judicial system in the United States? She said yes, but what she said that was super helpful and necessary was that we have to, one, and this was related to another question, but I'm tagging it onto this one, is that we have to know English, right? In the US, uno tiene que conocer el inglés, o si no, la comunicación no va a poder existir. Esa conversación no va a poder existir, right? So we need to know English, not just Spanish, to be able to do well, and also understand, be already integrated, do internships, know judges, know other lawyers in some way or form or another. You need to participate in the federal system to be able to really do it well. So she thinks that we can, as students from the University of Puerto Rico, but you need to already start getting integrated into the system, to know the system, to really be able to effectively perform your role in that system. Now, she is known as a person, and apparently in recent years as well, to write many dissents, right? And so dissents, disidente. And what are these? Well, in layman's terms, these are opinions of a judge, individual opinions that are written when the court, right, or the Supreme Court justices that have the majority are writing an opinion, and they're saying, okay, this is how we're interpreting the law, the Constitution, and so on and so forth, the case, right? This is how we're going to decide the case. There's a majority opinion. And the dissent, o disidente, is when you say, I'm not in favor of this opinion. I actually am not in agreement with it. So someone asked her, well, what's the purpose of these, right, dissents o disidentes? ¿Qué son sus propósitos? Bueno, ella dijo que habían varias razones por la cual un juez va a querer escribir un disidente. So there's many reasons why a judge might write a dissent. Well, some of them is that you're looking, and this is the one that's mostly being talked about today, is especially in the schools, the law schools, it's to basically say, okay, it's kind of to put a bookmark, to leave a breadcrumb, I would say, like a valuable breadcrumb for future lawyers, for people who are visiting a case that is similar to the one that was decided a while ago, and they're looking at these dissents that were a part of these opinions and say, hey, wait a minute, that person actually, that judge rather, wrote about this, and their opinion, what they wrote is really in line with what we're thinking nowadays, right? So that would be something in the future, and that is really important to think about dissent for the sake of people in the future, right? Where I'm writing this now in hopes that someone would find it, would see it, would understand it, and would apply it. Maybe it might become become of a precedent and become a part of an argument in a future case that is related. Now, other times, though, she said, and this was really, it struck me, it seems obvious, right? But it's super important, is that other times it's to speak to the present, to the people there. And I can understand that when you think, maybe the decision, the case was not in someone's favor or in favor of a certain group. And it can just be disheartening, right? Puede ser bien frustrante, puede hasta traer uno como dolor, sufrimiento. But so these dissents are to say, hey, look, we understand. We didn't win this case, right? But this is what we want to set forth to show we care, to show that it matters, and that you're not just, now your case is resolved. We put it, we shelf it, and that's it. Que todo ya se acabó. No hay nada más que decir. No, but to say, look, this will forever be there, and that we do care, and we're still recognizing the value, right, that we're trying to still represent you in that way, right? The ones who might have lost the case. So I thought that was really important, and even just to bring up issues, relevant issues to the present moment, right? Regardless of if you're more conservative, more liberal, it's to bring out issues, right? Important issues. Another thing is really just to lay out arguments for cases, and you're bringing in laws, you're bringing in things that are relevant, right? Other previous cases, other arguments that you think are relevant to this case, and should actually, because of these different things, the arguments, the laws, and so on, you're arriving at the judge is arriving at a different conclusion, and that the court right now is deciding erroneously this case, right? No está decidiendo, no está llegando a cabo un veredicto justo que merece la ley, because it's not following proper art. It's not that there are better arguments right out there, and so the people who write dissents are saying these are the stronger arguments, these are the arguments that should win the day, and unfortunately did not, right? And so that's why they dissent. Now, in another question related to constitutionality or the Constitution, she was discussing a wide range of things related to, nowadays, or even maybe in the past, people thought they were above the law, or is it really that the law is above the people? And she really set a strong case for saying that the law is above the people, that just because you don't like a law doesn't mean that you, right, don't follow it, right? Even our civil code, nuestro Código Civil de 2020 dice, la ignorancia de la ley no excusa de su cumplimiento, right? So even when you're ignorant about a law, you can't just say, well, I was ignorant, I didn't know, and so you're off the hook. No. And by nature, if you know the law and then you try to be above the law, you're also in error. If ignorance doesn't give you forgiveness or pardon, then knowing the law and then choosing to say I am above the law isn't gonna be any better, right? So that was something that she discussed, and really I agree with her. The law is above the people. Why? Because the people voted others in power to create laws, to observe, to analyze, to make sure that they're being actually executed, that they're being followed and obeyed, right? And so that would be the judges, and then people to execute the laws as well, right? Until we have law enforcement and others who help make sure that the laws are being followed. And I think that's super important, to have the law above the people. Now, if the people want to repeal a law or to change a law or to promote something else, then they go through the proper channels. But there are channels that are for that purpose, right? To change the laws. You can't just decide, oh, this one yes, that one no. Then we become everything becomes arbitrary, and we just live in a state of anarchy, and that's not the way to go either. So we need to have the law above the people, so that they can, that way, regardless of what we think, we still need to make sure that we obey and respect, right? It's the same way we respect other people, but we also respect the laws, regardless of if we disagree with them. And if we don't like a person in power, if we don't like a certain law, then we see to move to an action to be able to change it, right? But for the common good, hopefully, right? That's at least the expectation they hope. Ahora, la última cosa, the last thing we, talked about, que yo creo que es de suma importancia, is this idea of what is the justice system for? And one student said, we have a justice system basically that reacts, and it doesn't act. It doesn't prevent harm. It sometimes seems to be the perpetrator of harm, right? The student didn't say it that way, but it could be said of it that way. And this student asked, how can we create a legal system that acts, right, sooner and protects better? And I thought that was such a good question. Now, again, so the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor, not speaking ex cathedra, she's not saying, this is how it's going to be, this is how it is, and so on. But she gave her opinion, and she said, which was, very bold, she says, we basically become lawyers to fight lost causes. Now, these lost causes, sometimes, well, at least the way that she put it kind of struck me. It's kind of surprising. Lost causes, when you hope to win your cases, when you hope that you can make a difference, but sometimes you don't always win. Sometimes you don't get it right? And I think that that's the point. She's saying you fight even when maybe you might lose. You fight for things you believe in, right? And I think that that's important, where you fight for things that are worth fighting for, even when they don't seem to bring the results that you want. And you keep fighting because you believe in what you're fighting for, regardless if it's a lost cause or not. Hopefully you win the day, right, at the end of it. But as a lawyer, you don't always win your cases. And honestly, we can't expect to. We're not Harvey Specter from Suits, who wins all of his cases, right? He even learns eventually that he can't win all of them. And there's more important things than winning. Now, at the same time, she said that those who win every case really aren't good lawyers. And it was surprising. But what she said made absolute sense, because we're not really challenging ourselves if we're always winning cases. If we lose, we also learn. When we fail, we learn. And so I think that I can resonate with that. But I also think, as lawyers, as future lawyers, we're probably going to work in the gray, right? And there's room for a lot of interpretation because we work in the gray. The legal system, the things, as much as judges, as much as lawmakers try to be clear in what they say and what they write and so on, there's room for interpretation, right? And more importantly, we as lawyers, we work in representation, right? That is a profession, profession in representation, representing other people, companies, organizations, entities, whatever you might say. And it's really to represent them in a way that is reasonable, in a way that is just, in a way that is moral, and you're fighting for things that you personally believe in, right? Because you have that moral compass. You take on these cases and you see them to their end. You give it all that you can, and whether you lose or you win, it was still a just and reasonable cause, right? So I would say, I would probably modify what she said to say really that we become lawyers to fight just causes. Obviously, the word just, we would need to define it, and it's a little loose at times, but things that we believe are worth fighting for, and we push on. And if we lose one case, we take another one that is like it, and we push on. And you use that opportunity, right? We use that opportunity of representation and interpretation to provide the best legal help possible. And that's another thing that she talked about, where it was offering legal help even when people can't afford it. Working pro bono cases, right? Though for free, working in clinics where people that are underprivileged, underrepresented, and so on need to go for help, and you offer them that, right? So fighting for just causes also means fighting for those that can't fight for themselves, and uplifting those who can't fight to help them have the ability to fight, to have the understanding, to really know their rights and obligations, and to live in a society that is effective, that is just, and that really where justice rules the day in the best possible way. However, obviously that's super hard to do, but honestly, I think that is a goal to aspire to, and I think Sonia Sotomayor, hopefully she would agree. I think she would agree. So that was our Conversatorio. That was our talk with the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor, and honestly, it was a privilege to be a part of that, to hear from her and just really reflect on all of the things that were brought by the students and shared by her. Well, that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next one. For now, the court's adjourned. Music in today's episode was by Lone Canyon, Ivy Bakes, and Neon Beach. Hope you enjoyed it.